All right, welcome Vibe Tribe to another Wednesday. We're going to have such a good time tonight with our good friend, Beth Martins, who's returned for who knows how many times we've had her on the channel, but it's always a pleasure, always an honor. And I find that the topic that we have in store for everyone tonight is particularly in perfect timing, as I mean, they always do, right? But Beth, if you guys haven't heard of her yet, she has a excellent podcast, The King Hero's Journey. She's also the mind behind the House of Free Will, and she's here to talk about a brand new course series that she started, helping you crush, but with boundaries, supporting your inner nurturer archetype, basically designed to help give overgivers, chronic overgivers, the ability to transform all those burdens they keep picking up into healthy boundaries, and to make their service to others also serve themselves in a balanced way. I think a lot of us can resonate with that, but the timing aspect is that we're entering Cancer season very soon, and that's like the top nurturer of the zodiac, the one that wants to be nurtured as much as they give a lot of nurture. But sometimes, that balance is out of whack, and the ones that are those givers are also the ones that feel most hurt when they're not receiving it. And I think there's a lot to be said about this topic. Obviously Beth has got herself a whole course about it, and I know she's speaking from experience, and she's helped many people cross the threshold into a more fulfilling life, and I'm stoked to get into it. We got Gabe with us, of course, the slickest of dissidents. So what's up, everybody? Welcome. Zenith in the chat, Kabir, Liam, see Jenny, Joe Potter, Artist Seer, Richard Bonner, that guy, Pencil Tucky. Good to see you, man. All right, so Beth, how you doing? Welcome to the Rant. Thanks for coming on tonight.
I am really good, and so happy to be here. Happy to see you. Sometimes I only see my friends live on a stream, and that's just fine with me because we usually get into the most excellent conversations. And yeah, I was super excited to hear about the timing that I usually don't plan around. As I mentioned, I didn't say, oh, Cancer season is going to come around then. It's perfect timing for a nurture course, but here it is, the perfect timing.
Gabe, how are you doing, my friend?
Hello as always, but I'm doing quite wonderful. Thanks for asking. I've been a little busy this week. I had a couple shows in a row. I did the Ronin, the Ronin experience, where we talked about the Joe Rogan experience. It's been a topic for me with the Terrence Howard malarkey and people claiming that math is fake and gay. And also, I was over on the One-on-One podcast, and we dug in on some Ludwig Wittgenstein, and also the Rogan spell, and as well, something Chance and I are going to really polish up for the future is we're digging in on the book Verbal Judo, as I've discovered that its author has been packaged into a hyper sigil and instilled onto the children at a very fascinating age in a very fascinating way. So more on that to come. But yeah, I've been busy. Oh, and one more thing. I freed up my storage space on my phone today. PK, you are my... So yeah, I can go long form again.
All right, so expect big things from the Slick Dissident channel, and I'm really looking forward to the verbal judo conversation. Just to preview that a little bit, Gabe discovered a teacher of the police in a video series where literally giving away the secrets of like your greatest weapon is the name. The name is black magic, like spelling it out, but in the training to the authorities. It's really wild. So we're going to get a lot out of that. I'm excited for the research. But Beth, let's kick it over to you. Is there stuff you want to promote about your channel, or just remind people of that maybe I didn't spell out before we jump into our topic today?
They can see, if you like, my website, bethmartins.com is kind of a hub for everything that I do, and a good place if for some reason social media goes down. But I am on YouTube, a new channel there, and Facebook, and we're actually streaming to Facebook and YouTube because it's the only ones they would let me do. I don't know what that is. And you can find me on Instagram and X. I keep trying to have a presence. The prostitutes there the prostitute bots, I should say, used to like me a lot there, and they're losing interest. So I don't know what's up with that. Some shadow banning or something. I don't know. And yeah, it's been a very interesting last 4 or 5 going. Is it 4 years into it now? I guess we're still 2024. Feels like 5 years already. But so many changes. I've actually been doing the audio version of my book, as I think you know, Chance, already. So it's all recorded and edited for spacing and almost ready to send off to get mastered. I'm just doing some addendums because the last 4 years have caused some changes in my perspective that isn't baby in the bathwater. I can't just say like, oh, I have to go rewrite that whole book. I would rather write a new book, but I'm happy to have the chance to bring up to date a few things that got out of date in the last while.
It's nice the digital age has the advantage that we can sort of let the material evolve with us and the additions can roll out. That's pretty cool. So everyone, Beth's book about archetypes is a really great way to get in touch with some of the inner parts of yourself, as several recent episodes of Innerverse have covered off. The most effective psychological improvements in terms of systems we can use to analyze and to coalesce our self into wholeness is the parts-based approach, the parts model to mind, recognizing that what we consider ourself as an individual is made up of a lot of different parts, and different situations bring them out in us, and we might have one that we lean into more archetypically, but it's worth getting familiar with all of the different range of your entire wheel, whether that's a system like the Enneagram, like Gabe likes to rock, or Beth's archetype work, or internal family systems. I mean, it's good to have all of these lenses. So, Beth, want to talk about our nurturer cure now? Like, tell people, like, I'm just going to kick it to you. Let's do it.
Yeah, so the nurturer archetype is something that has been in my awareness for quite some time. And it first came into my awareness as something that I literally never saw about myself. And I remember doing an archetype quiz of somebody else as a coach that I used to work with. And I came up with a nurturer in my top 3. And I'm like, no way, right? That's not me. It's definitely not me. I'm not that kind of person. And I have people peg me and say, oh, I bet you like to make supper for everybody and feed everybody. And it's like, no, I don't actually, not unless they make yummy noises and super appreciate the quality of the food or whatever. But yeah, so it was a surprise to find it in myself. And it was a massive revelation to find it in myself, because it made a lot of things that hadn't made sense before make sense. And another surprise to me was when my mother was very sick and in her last days. We didn't know how close she was to her last days, but I said, hey, Mom, do you want to do my archetype quiz, which at that point was based on my book? And she came up the nurturer. And I'm like, whoa, I didn't expect that at all, because I really didn't see that quality in her. And then she made a bunch of admissions, like, yeah, she really suffered the amount that she put out to take care of people around her. And I know her mother probably had the same thing with a very ailing, for many, many years in a row, husband. And so when you go out into the world and try to have relationships and friendships, it's very easy to see, surface relationships, not so much. But once they get a little bit deep, you'll start running up against what I now can see as damaged boundaries, that those boundaries have not been have not come into people's awareness as a needed skill. And it's so systemic and so prevalent that for years now, I've already heard this message inside myself that I need to do some teaching on this archetype. And, it also keeps me in the game to be looking at it. And it was actually very hard to decide to do this, because I had been last fall going through some health trouble. And there was this teeter-totter, like, if I create something brand new from scratch now, like cooking from scratch, and everything that goes into putting a course out, not just creating the course itself, but letting people know about it, and several layers of behind the scenes activity that nobody even knows goes on at all. I know the amount of work that it requires, and the time and the energy, and I'm like, oh, but is it going to take me down? This was going to be the year I was like only going to look after myself, which is actually a nurture shadow, by the way. And so I worked through it, walked my talk, used my tools, and had a good coach in my back end that was supporting me. And I came out the other side with a clear preference to do this because there's so much need for it. Literally, there's not a single person I come across that doesn't struggle and suffer to one degree or another with the nurturer, or did. And I just imagine, what would the world look like if it was full of people with good boundaries, and who even understood what a good boundary means. And that's something that I notice that people have a lot of, oh, just say no kind of approach to the whole thing. Well, if you overgive, then learn how to say no. But it's actually not the solution for people at all that have this nurturer really close to them, because saying no goes against your nurturing nature. So it's much more highly nuanced than that. And if you like, I could go through some of the shadows of this archetype, because they do reveal the archetype much more clearly than the gifts do sometimes, although the gifts are also very much a part of it.
Yeah, I like that idea. I've seen a lot of nurturer shadow stuff just in the last several tunings that I've done. So I found that cool. It was very synchronized, which is helpful coming into this podcast conversation, because I've got it all fresh in mind. Like, here's something that happens. Here's something that happens. So I think this will be fun comparing notes, and it ought to be able to show people where things that they took as like normal or how they're supposed to be, maybe it's not. There's a reason why it's not working for you, and start to lift yourself up by the perspective shift.
Exactly.
Dave, you got anything, buddy, before we jump onto this list of the nurturer shadows? Like, where do you see the nurturer in the Enneagram? I'm actually kind of curious about that question before we lead in.
Was that
we
the
can't
question?
hear you though, brother.
Yeah. I have right off the top of my head, I have a couple Enneagram examples. I think, Beth, I think you're going to love this because you speak archetype so fluently. I think you'll really love a couple of my notions, and we can test them against the system here tonight. One of my favorite, generalizing, the number 2 personality type is called the giver. They have a shadow of pride, and they have a very strong propensity to over nurture and overgive to their own detriment. And they keep private lists in the back of their mind where they think there's going to be some payoff that they never asked for or made clear. And then they blow up and become the grand accuser when that list is not met. The infernal name of their shadow, the giver has the shadow of pride, whose infernal name is Lucifer. And I went through a very Luciferian experience when I came and calling on my list of expectations that I never made clear, and I felt like a grand accuser in that moment. So, Chewbacca. Chewbacca is one of my favorite number 2 personality types because everybody loves Chewbacca. He's never doing anything. He's never breaking any rules or being, everybody understands him. He speaks grumbles, but it's universally interpretive. Um, but then when Lando Calrissian does that one betrayal, then Chewbacca strangles Lando Calrissian in a very iconic scene. And Lando Calrissian, I can't breathe. And when they redid Star Wars, they accentuated the strangulation sound. They made his throat crushing even more pronounced in the audio in the remake. So a great amount of social engineering was layered into the remake of Star Wars. But Beth, you're going to love the trope of the Wookiee is Wookiee hostage technique. And the Wookiee hostage technique is you take the big, strong, nurturing guy, and he's so giving that he lets you tie him up and take him hostage. And I know you're feeling that, right? Isn't that a good one? The Wookiee. So yeah, I
Oh,
wanted to share Chewbacca, and then another decent one is Shaggy. I think Shaggy's another good giver we could put on the list.
that one I don't know, but the Wookiee hostage technique's so interesting. My mind is popping with meaning around that one. And yeah, that nails it actually. That number two space really nails it. I haven't done a lot of work on the Enneagram at all. My family used to try to type me, and they couldn't, for some reason, place me in a particular area on it. And in a way, isn't that the goal, that you're well rounded, that you have energy in all the spaces? Yeah, chances nodding.
Well, yeah, we have all of those
Yes,
aspects to
very
ourselves.
much.
Right. Yeah, they couldn't
Yes.
pigeonhole me, so I was always
Beth,
proud
I
to
was thinking about
describe.
you all day today.
Aw, that's lovely. That's nice. It's
Nice.
such a great
I,
surprise to see
I
you here,
was.
Dave.
Uh, yes. You remind me so much of my favorite goddess. And I just want
Mm.
to compliment you and tell you that, I love Athena. I love Athena. And when I was thinking about you, I just couldn't deny that you resonate with my favorite goddess. So I just wanted to share that with you. And she's a number one, by the way, a reformer perfectionist with the shadow of um, wrath.
Ah, very good. You haven't seen that side of me yet. Yeah, interesting. And the nurturer can have its own wrath, and you kind of nailed it with the expectations. I actually recently had an experience with my son. I took him away on a trip to Texas, and I'm extremely giving to my son. My parents were so generous with me. They may have had flaws and faults, but they just never withheld in any way, and were always wanting to give us experiences. So this is passing on to my son as well. And we got close to the end of our trip. We're just about home from Minneapolis to Winnipeg, which is a short jaunt. And I asked him for a favor, and he's like, "Oh, well, that's going to cost you, and it's going to be this much." And I'm like, and then that it was like kind of the straws. The straw that broke the camel's back, which I didn't know that there was so much weight already on the camel's back. But I've given and given and given and given and given, and all of a sudden, I just want one little favor, and he's got enough nerve to tell me it's going to cost me like this, and I'm like, "Ah." So I put my tools to the test again, and just was silent and quiet and doing my own inner work, and it came out the other side. But it really revealed to me how that giving and giving can come from what I call a nurturer's high, and you're drunk on it because it feels so good to give. That is a good feeling. And when you've got to a place in your life where you have taken care of enough of your own needs, and you're not starving and struggling to just survive yourself, and you have some excess, then it becomes like an imperative that you give back. Like, for example, if you heal from something, some kind of circumstance or bad thing, I always notice, especially working with clients, that right on the heels of the healing itself, they want to give back. They want to help others overcome the same challenge or a similar challenge. So there is something really hardwired in us about that. And I was always having the question about people's boundaries and why the nurture is so prevalent. There's literally not a single person that comes through my door that doesn't show signs of that archetype. Of course, it's the hero's journey that is universal. So it can be like shooting fish in a barrel, but why again would they be attracted to me? And so I started investigating, and it really wasn't until about 2 weeks ago when I was on the table of my osteopath, speaking of healing services. And he's a nurturer through and through. It's funny. The first time I called to make an appointment, he said, "Oh, I have a 6 month waiting list." I'm like, "Okay, I'm not in trouble, so I'll just get on your list. I've heard you're really good, and I'll wait." Well, I get a call from him the next day saying that he had an opening, or that he had all these new openings, and you could just see how he did this. Could be a pendulum swing. I don't know him well, and I'm certainly not going to judge him for it. But you can go from that place of saying no to everybody and then you heal or you forget or both. You go into amnesia, and your nurturer, what can be shadow driving you, gets you back to that place of helping everybody. Again, I can't say whether that was happening for him or not, but I thought it was an interesting example. And so there can be a lot of giving to get that is very hidden from the nurturer. So they give and they give and they give and they go above and beyond the call, and they show up maybe at odd hours, and they, just will do whatever it takes to assist and be there for somebody else. And then something can happen that breaks that spell and makes you sober all of a sudden. It is a kind of drunkenness when you're on that nurturer's high, and you crash and you burn and you have to lick your wounds. And there can be that tendency to just put up the sign to say, I'm not helping anybody ever again. I quit. It's over. Whatever you want, the answer is no. And then that puts you in actually a very highly new compromised situation. So being overstressed, being overworked, giving too much, not asking for enough in return for what you give is one side of the shadow. And then that other side is where you deny your nurturer side altogether and abandon that part of yourself. So both places are very costly in energy. They drain the life out of you. They go against the sacred purpose of the nurturer, which is to care. And so when they find themselves in a place of not caring, which can seem like a good option for, first you get the evidence that your caring has resulted in suffering for you. And then you think, oh, I just shouldn't care. I'll turn a blind eye. It makes, unfortunately, shadow nurturers some of the most cruel people ever, right? They can do the most damage. And so I was actually the recipient of many nurturers. Did you want to say something, Chance, by the way?
No, sorry. I was like testing how well my mic picked up from a distance.
Okay,
I
no
saw
problem.
how far your mic away was, and I was like, maybe that's more comfortable. Maybe I should change. Sorry, total interruption.
Not a worry. Not a worry. No, I'm just
No, this
sensitive
is
to that.
good. This is good.
Right. So what was I going to say? I was just going to jump into something, but I was, maybe I'll go back to the shadow of pride that's there, because a lot of the shadows that a nurturer experiences, they don't want to see about themselves because they're so far off from their actual values. So they hide the burnout. They hide the, getting to the end of the day and realizing you didn't eat a meal or brush your teeth, but everybody else is looked after. And they hide their expectations, because if they made those expectations public, then that person might say, oh, well, that's actually not in line with me, and I don't want to participate that way. So they wouldn't be in that giving and receiving relationship. So they keep that a secret. And the biggest secret of all, which nurturers sometimes can't deny, but will inevitably find in themselves, is they end up resenting the people that they're helping if they're in that place of overgiving and not having good boundaries. So there you find yourself hating the people you're helping, dreading helping them. And it is torture. It's an inner torture. It's a huge inner conflict. And coming clean with that to anybody can be really difficult, especially the resentment part. I mean, you really don't want to tell people you're helping that you hate them. You want to work out that in a more graceful way with a coach or a counselor or a healer, that kind of thing. So, there's a lot of pitfalls that they like to make sacrifices, but in my opinion, the word, and you guys, I'm sure, can go off on this like crazy because it's your specialty, but the word sacrifice to me means to make sacred, right?
That's the definition of the word. That's actually that's what it means by etymologically speaking.
Right.
Like as a compound word splitting, it's to make sacred.
Right. Yeah. So that's a really good reference point to see if, when you are sacrificing, are you actually making the situation sacred for you and everyone, or are you martyring yourself and building those deep inner resentments and injuries to yourself that came about by your own choice?
That's great. There's a lot to add. I mean, this is obviously something layered enough that there's an entire course that you've developed around it, which I think is excellent, because I have found in working with clients that this is one of the toughest mindsets for me to persuade someone away from. Like I often say that like the process of being an energy healer is highly dependent on being persuasive. You got to make a really good case for why like this mindset shift is actually better. And a lot of nurturers have created justifications around their behavior that are that seem rational, seem logical. They're highly intelligent people typically. I mean, they often need to be to juggle as much as they tend to juggle. You just can't do that on a low octane brain, right? But let's start with the hiding of expectations, because that is something I think, whether or not you're like a big overgiver, everyone can relate to this. I call it, in say, especially romantic relationships, I call it just keeping score, where there's a scorecard of in your mind running of, well, I did this, this, and this for you, so why aren't you going to do anything for me? And the problem with hiding your expectations like that is that it causes the one who you're helping to themselves develop unhealthy expectations.
Right.
So
exactly.
like if your expectations are hidden, then theirs are going to get all out of whack. And then by the time you hit the wall and you're blowing up or you're withdrawing or whatever it is that your meltdown looks like, then they're like, but I'm depending on this. It's like feeding the geese human food, and now they're showing up, or the crows or something. Now they're showing up every morning at the same time. Like, give me the breadcrumbs, damn it. And like, this is an unhealthy expectation. I had this tube of goo that's like cat treats that I was giving my cats, and I gave it to them like 2 nights in a row. And I never explained to them that I needed them to start cleaning their own litter box in exchange for the goo. And they're showing up on the clock, like the specific time. Give me the goo. Give me the goo. And, you know, it's exactly like that. You're just handing out treats without actually making anyone do a trick. That's kind of the simplest metaphor. But then to the relationship side of it, I think in like friendships, familial relations, work relations, the stating of expectations and the transactionality aspect can be okay. Less so as you approach family and closer family members, where I think there needs to be a different type of system with close loved ones, especially romantic partners, where you just throw out the scorecard entirely and you make the agreement, we're both going to do our best for each other, and we're not going to put a value on one thing over one person's skill set or offerings over another. We're just both committed to doing our best. And that's fine. But like, especially in work, business type stuff, you need to have like, you need to know the value of what you're giving, and you need to ask for the value that you need. So anyway, that's the huge thing. Hiding your expectations is causing the people you're helping to develop unhealthy expectations across the board.
Yeah, and just to reflect that keeping score or accounting in relationships of what you gave and what they gave and where does it match up, there's absolutely no end to it. You can't get to the bottom of that query in loving human relationships. You might be able to do it more so in business that have that artificial entity in the way, but I think it's actually no different in business relationships, because what is our highest ideal would be unconditional giving. And that's actually the reason to charge well for your services, so that you feel satisfied when you do give unconditionally, rather than undercharging and then you overgive and all those dynamics we talked about. So yeah, accounting is a very low form of relationship as far as I'm concerned. And it's really interesting because nurturers are often seen to be quite invincible. And that's for good reason. It's because they've come a certain distance in their life and they have become accomplished enough that they've met their own needs and have excess. And so people end up seeing them as that way. So when a nurturer goes down, for example, I was Freeman interviewed me on this one, and he says that he helps everybody, but when he goes down, everybody disappears. And one of the reasons I think is that the nurturer can create a persona of that. I'm so strong. I'm good. I'm showing up for everybody. I'm doing everything. And so if that underlying motive, and to me, all my work is all about hidden motive, being able to see there's some conscious desire, yeah, like I want to help and I want to serve and I have the ability, but the unconscious desire can be, for example, for connection. So some people help so that they have a connection to other human beings. And they think that if they are needed in those situations and become indispensable, and this is actually one entire module of the Nurture Cure course, is how to cure that need to be indispensable so that, everybody's always coming to you and you feel so important. And in the end, the punchline is that you're going to survive because you're helping everybody and they'll be there for you when you need help. But it actually ends up having just about the opposite effect. So having the persona of being invincible, I think, is definitely one of those nurture shadows, showing no vulnerability whatsoever, just always, sucking it up and licking your wounds and then getting out there and pounding the streets. This archetype, this course, the nurture cure, is actually a blend of the warrior and the nurturer archetype, because the warrior comes just before the nurturer. And the nurturers can end up with a whole lot of armor in the disguise of the boundaries that are not really boundaries at all. They're a hard shell casing meant to keep people out. And then I was just going to say about expectations, they're really tricky because you often don't even know you have them until they're not met. And you can go into it feeling clean. So this is one of the reasons I teach people to distinguish the difference between dopamine and real energy, or adrenaline and real energy. They're very different. They can, one can make you feel all high and bright and capable, like a superwoman or man. And we like that because it's better than laying on the floor feeling helpless and not doing anything about anything. But if you can see that those things are very big losses of energy and have cost, then you can start to work through that and see, okay, yeah, I'm staying in this relationship and I know it's actually not good for me, but there's some kind of payoff that I am hoping for in the future. And so, yeah, it's all the inner work to see about yourself what you don't see.
So let's zero in on the way nurturers tend to be seen as invincible. So I have some insight to share there. One of the reasons behind that, in my opinion, is that a big aspect of the nurturer shadow is the need to appear to be perfect. That they themselves have a deep-seated need to appear perfect to others due to a deep insecurity and lack of actual confidence, or some hole in their confidence. There's different ways someone could build that. I don't think every nurturer has the same set of shadows or the same set of conditioning. There's different ways it can manifest, but that's one I see a lot, is that there's some way that they were not made to feel powerful as a child, or not made to feel confident, and then they need to seem perfect to everybody, and so they are doing this giving, doing everything for everybody, because that creates the picture of it. And it's interesting how in the biofield, talk about the right ankle in the biofield often, because it's an interesting area that demonstrates the connection between perfectionism and procrastination. Because you would at first glance not think those two things go together, but they're actually the same thing. And in the nurturer, they tend to be the perfectionist in the sense of they're going to go above and beyond in the extra mile for everybody else, but it's a way of procrastinating taking care of their own needs. And that is part of what leads to the burnout. I'm going to let Gabe in.
Yes, thank you so much. Uh, This is so fascinating how while I'm listening to Beth, I'm formulating some of my own resonance to this, and a chance comes and like tips the scales for me, and I'm like, I've got to share these thoughts. Uh, in the beginning of the Iliad, Achilles is in a very uh, passionate argument with Agamemnon. Achilles is the perfectionist reformer with the shadow of wrath. Agamemnon is in the position of a giver. This is actually a cosmodrama, and I'm going to use a word that because Agamemnon has retracted a gift. He wants his gift back. And the word Indian giver is a horrible term, but what's amazing is it's in the stars. Agamemnon is Capricorn. In the Indus constellation, the Indian is right next to him. In this epic moment of retracting a gift that we've given a pejorative term, that's actually revealing its cosmic significance. But you mentioned armor, Beth, and Achilles has his sacred armor, and he ends up going into retreat and kind of abandoning his post over the whole event. Um, and also, we're talking about hidden expectations. The word noble is hiding the word hidden. And so to have noble intent or noble expectations is to say, like, you're shooting for the sky, but you're not going to tell anybody because that would diminish the virtue of, it would make it less if you told people that uh your inner feelings about the situation, so you keep these things to yourself just to execute. So noble means hidden. um and then I'm going to share one weird thing. Friedrich Nietzsche used the word atrabilicos, and I went in the dictionary to look this word up. And when I look words up, I read the whole page. And as I'm reading atrabilicus, the words around that word start to paint the scene of Achilles attacking Agamemnon. And I'm realizing I think the whole dictionary has scenery from the epics laid out in order in a fascinating way, but it's kind of lost in translation. But I mean, Agamemnon, Achilles, attack. Atrabilicus is the name of Agamemnon's priest who just betrayed him. So, in the strangest way, when you look up these words, you might you might be looking at scenery in the heavens from the epics. So yeah, I just wanted to throw these things on because you guys are like speaking right in line with where my thoughts are in the heavens. So I just wanted to share all those little nuggets. And oh, and kings have nobility because they can read hidden. They can see the glimmer in your eye and tell what's going on the inside.
Yeah, that's one of the definitions of noble is generous.
Mm,
Interesting.
interesting. And that's one of the superpowers of the nurturer is to be generous like that. So that's very, very interesting that the word means hidden. And I wonder if there's something inherent there about it. Very interesting what you're saying in that retracting. I had an experience of a best friend that was getting married, and if you ever have anyone that gets married, you know that it can be a very like all-consuming time, and there's a lot of energy that goes towards them and the event and everything. So I went in a nurturer high, and I was giving and giving, and I remember that, like, I asked her, would this be good if I just like covered all the bills for the accoutrements that are going to be all like decorations and stuff like that? And she said to me, let me think about it like this. And I went, what? What do you mean, let me think about it? Right? Like I'm making such a generous offer. And then it took her a long time to come back and say, oh yeah, you can pay all the bills. And I went like, no, not doing it anymore because you didn't honor the gift. So there was a retraction there. And it is one of the consequences of another archetype I'm writing about right now. It's so top of mind with the saboteur, how there can be opportunities to receive when somebody's offering at a time. And if you are not honoring of the gift, then you can end up in a more sabotage kind of a situation, or you might forfeit that choice. So I'm just blending and blurring, but I'm curious what you guys think of this, because I was about to tell the story and I managed not to share the punchline. On that table with my osteopath, he's poking around in my neck and says, "Oh, this thing over here, that's something to do with your birth." And so I'm on the table and he's doing his work, which is really amazing. And I'm contemplating my birth. And I remember asking my mom when I was when I was pregnant with my son, how did my birth go? Because I wanted to see, is there anything I'm inheriting here that I can maybe even preempt? Because I was very serious about doing the inner work to birth in a good and best possible case scenario way. And so I remember her telling me that she had no idea. She said, "Who knew?" Because it was a twilight birth when they drugged you with morphine and, is it scopamine, if I'm saying the name correctly? There's two main drugs that were used in the 60s for that purpose. And it's actually nicknamed the amnesia drug. And so I was contemplating, whether, I don't know if I was just thinking about it or I'm actually in the experience, but I'm starting to have the
It's
emotion.
scopolamine. And they use
Scopolamine,
it.
thank you.
I think that's like also a truth drug too.
It's a compliance drug. They can get you to
Yeah.
do anything that they want and you won't remember. So it's like, wow, how convenient to, and so I didn't, my mom didn't know what was happening at my birth, and nobody knew what was happening at my birth. Anything could have happened. Very unfortunate. I'm probably going to be interviewing a woman, Janice Barcelo, on this. She's a birth expert and she has horrendous stories. I was actually very traumatized after reading all of these citations of abuse that take place when women are out of it. And we think that somehow that was behind us, but it's still happening today. Even if it's not those two drugs, it's other drugs that have a similar effect if women are taking them. And so there I was in the birth canal being born, and I realized that my mom was dying because of the effect of these drugs, right? They slow the heart rate, they take away brain activity, the consciousness is gone. And I had that memory that, oh, my mom is dying. And I realized that my shadow nurturer was born in that moment. Because when your caregiver that is responsible for keeping you safe and alive, which is the case for infants, goes down, you immediately want to look after them. And then I saw at the same time how my mom's nurturer was killed in that moment. Not killed, unfortunately, it goes into the unconscious, it doesn't go away. But her ability to care for us was intensely compromised by that. And the ability to produce oxytocin is interrupted, so the bonding doesn't happen, and often nursing is difficult in those situations. Again, learning more from Janice about it. And then I made the leap and I went, wow, there's a lot of reasons that people don't have good boundaries, but this might be a huge one, that we were born to extremely compromised women. And Matt Presti said a story. Someone was saying they enjoyed that interview with him, or of him with me. And he was telling a story about a little girl at a fire who was holding on to her dad's hand, and the other hand of the dad was holding onto his tricycle, and their house had just been completely engulfed in flames. So the house was gone, and he was sobbing uncontrollably beside himself. And Matt overheard the little girl look up at her dad and said, "Don't worry, Daddy, you saved my bicycle." So there she was, trying to look after him, right? And it should have been the other way around, although you couldn't hold anything against that man. He had faced the loss and he was lucid about the loss. He knew what it meant. But see how that mechanism happens. We are wired to care. So it's now, the punchline, unfortunately, is that if you try to take care of the other before you've met your own needs, it's a botched job. It's totally a botched job. You're always going to be coming out of the fear of not surviving yourself. So that's why you overgive. That's why you show up for people unconditionally. Whether it's the cats and the goo or whoever comes on your doorstep looking for something, then that's what they do. And my mom was really interesting. I'm not being hard on her. I just have gained so much insight about my life through her. And when I was pregnant with my son, she told me flat out one time. I was there for a lunch, and she told me flat out, she said, "Beth, I'm not looking after your child when they're born, right?" And I'm like, "Oh, all right." I didn't wasn't planning that, and I didn't have any thought about it right now, but okay, thanks for letting me know how it's going to go. And so because of that, being just outright, "Hey Brayden, nice to see you," being so blatant with me, I went out of my way not to rely on her. I went into the community. I sourced other connections. I actually became families with another family so that we could co-support each other in our lives. And it was actually really amazing. I'm grateful for that experience and even the need to do that. But there's that strong sense of self-protection that nurturing is going to both, it's like a double bind where nurturing is going to be your life saver, and it's also going to be the thing that takes your life. So through the programming, you end up locked into this very odd contract, and you can't let go. So my mom was somebody that she was sitting there. It was very ironic because I thought I was being an adult and responsible just to take care of my son and his needs in any other way possible. But my sisters, who have no boundaries, God bless them, they constantly asked my mom for help. And the kids were always at her place, even though she didn't want that. And you could feel she loved them, of course, like a lot, and no lack of love. But it was a hardship for her to have these. She thought she was like out of jail when we grew up and had our own lives. And then here came the grandchildren, and that interfered with her. So it becomes a real lose-lose proposition. I was also going to say, Chance, when you talk about the element of perfectionism, that is a very distinct program that I help people to release. It has an architecture that is unmistakable inside the body, just like the archetypes themselves do. And it is one of the what do you call it, like flagship programs of the lover archetype, which is the next archetype on the journey, right? And at this stage of the game, you're still working through the ego. For the nurturer, it's a me or them kind of proposition. Do I look after them, or do I look after myself? And so you end up in this accounting game. And that's one of the, for me, bad pieces of advice that therapists give people, is that you need to balance, like look after them and look after yourself and look after them. And it's this balancing game, which is kind of necessary. That it's a remedial effect. If you're really like totally looking after everybody and not yourself, then reclaiming some of that time for yourself is good. But you're forever going to swing on that pendulum. You're going to try to get it perfect, right? That you have this perfect balance. It's totally a moving target. It won't flow with the daily things that are showing up, the needs that show up. Many nurturers get called unexpectedly. Suddenly somebody had a heart attack, or someone is giving birth, or there's something unexpected, some tragedy, friend calls you in the middle of the night. And you do want to be there for them. That to me is like the saddest picture ever of a humanity with either dead or dysfunctional nurturers, where we don't help each other, because I think it's hardwired. We're not able to accomplish our sacred purpose on our own, that it requires all of the people and variety of inputs and influences and assistance, filling in the holes that you can't fill in yourself. And so it does drive you to think that there is some, again, life-saving mechanism, thank you, Phil, that is going to come through your getting that help perfect and your balance perfect and all of that kind of thing. So yeah, really interesting. And it's the transition from the me or them ego side of the journey to the soul side of the journey, where instead of referencing other people, am I okay? Do you approve of me? Do you love me? Am I going to be safe? to where that conversation takes place with the creator, and you stop referencing out, and you're much more referencing in. But a new kind of perfectionism gets born there as well.
So much stuff to cover with this. There's just lots of shadow aspects. They have different styles of conditioning from person to person. I thought it was interesting when you shared Matt Presti's story about the little girl who's like protecting her father from the loss. I have seen a lot of nurturer types where it seemed to originate in a need to protect the parent of the opposite gender from the other parent. I've seen a lot of that. So a lot of women who were needing to protect their dad instead of being protected by their dad. And that's got a lot of aspects to the self-esteem side that would lead to the need to be seen as perfect and invulnerable too. So there's also worth considering, if you're this type of nurturer, you want to, this is where biofield tuning is useful, because we can like find this in your field and go target exactly what it is. But you might want to go into your history and ask yourself, like, what are the times where I felt like I had some kind of consequence for saying no where I needed to say no, or for withholding or withdrawing from the amount of over supporting I was doing? Where's the, what's the consequence for me? Like, what am I afraid will happen if I withdraw? And an example would be, maybe you have experiences of being ostracized by a group whenever you withdraw. There's a funny story of a recent client who, one of the memories we came across in the field was her doing someone else's art projects for them in an art class in elementary school, but then being like bullied by the friend group of the person who she was doing it for. And then, so it's like, there's this connection to, group with rejection. And that's why I'm trying so hard to be so perfect, is like, so this group will accept me. And then there's other examples for this individual where there was like a loss of a connection to a group when one person who they were over giving to, they withdrew from, or they, their expectations that were hidden finally crossed a line that caused them to blow up. And then there's the consideration. So I want people to think about that. If they're wanting to heal this dynamic in themselves, like what's the sort of cyclical expectation pattern that I seem to bump into whenever I have the crash part, when the relationship ends because I can't give anymore. And instead of things just changing in a healthy way, it's just over, or like, how does that work for me? And this same person I'm thinking of, we found an ancestral river component that was really interesting. The ancestral river being 10 inches off the body in the biofield. On each side, there's a maternal side and a paternal side, the left and right respectively. And so I was like hitting this ancestral river snag, and I was like, okay, tell me about the mother of your father, and where was there some sort of group ostracizing for her when she said no to something finally that she had been saying yes to but never really wanted to say yes to. It ended up being that this grandmother was in a marriage that was not good, and then she wanted to get out of the marriage and was told by her own father she'd be disowned from the family if she got a divorce, because it was like further back in time where that was much less acceptable. And anyway, there's oftentimes patterns in the family that are repeating, and we're, or what, like another example that I found interesting of late was, that's again an ancestor pattern, was that the person was presenting with a recent heart palpitations thing going on that was like brand new, shouldn't be happening, otherwise very healthy, but like heart racing sometimes that was like very uncomfortable. And it ended up relating to being overstrained, like overtaxed, nowhere to turn for help for an ancestor, again, like a father's mother, actually, who was in London during wartime in World War II, raising children with her husband away. So no one to turn to for help, giving more than they can give, overtaxed with the threat of fear and fear of death looming over, like there's the heart rate part. And so when this person was getting into that type of place themselves, in conjunction with, this is more theoretical, I'm not sure, but in conjunction with certain other stuck energy around the lockdowns that we recently went through, crossing the ancestral river, almost like an astrological conjunction, boom, the physical malady manifests from it. So there's like, it's interesting how like small our knowledge of these dynamics really is, once we throw out all of the what we know is bogus from mainstream psychiatry, mainstream medicine. And it's exciting too, because we can feel our way through this. It's our story we're working on and working through. It's our body. Like we can be the authority on how this stuff works for ourselves. But ultimately, another part of it that I wanted to circle back around to before I kick it to you, regarding the perfectionism procrastination axis, is that a lot of nurturers, when they are finally full and fed up and they can't take it anymore, they, instead of detaching from the actual cause of the stress or the anxiety, they will, it's like you said, sort of the go into the not caring mode, but they might just do it temporarily. Like they just cancel life for the day or cancel life for a week. And this is like then they're like recharging themselves, maybe they're really good at taking care of themselves when they're in the life is canceled mode. They top themselves off energetically, but then they just jump back into the fray and wait for that battery to get completely drained again. And so there's this very hellish pendulum swing that happens through that. And so, if you're the type of person that that your solution is to cancel life for a while, you might want to start reframing your relationship to your inner nurturer archetype and your ability to just fully detach. And this is one of the trickier areas to mentally reframe for yourself, because there tends to be, as I was saying a moment ago, a fear of total separation from a group or from a loved one for having boundaries. I think that's why your course is probably so helpful, because you've navigated that type of thing. You've helped people navigate that type of thing, and you're able to equip them to make the transition rather than sort of the angry blow up, because that's the nurturer shadow too, is like the fed up. I'm so nice. I never get mad. And then the straw breaks the camel's back and it's like dragon fire. It's a real thing. So anyway, kick it to you. I'm sure there's a lot to riff on there.
Yes, totally. The consequences from withdrawing your help is exactly the reason that people don't do it and don't get lucid with it. And what I notice is that we train people. So it's easy to blame somebody for taking advantage of you. And that's, again, one of the shadows. You wouldn't think that it's your shadow that somebody else is taking advantage of you. And yes, of course, there's, they're responsible for themselves, but you in the process have trained them how to be with you. And so I know from my past, I was looking back in all this reflection, seeing how I took advantage of my grandmother, because I thought, she loves to give. She just loves to do stuff for us. And she's just waiting for me to come and give her something new to do. And it couldn't be further from the truth, right? And so the fear is that, maybe my grandma, if she would have just said like, no, Beth, I'm not sitting here waiting for all your tasks. And if she said that, then maybe she would have that fear that I'm not going to love her. I'm not going to come see her. I'm not going to look after her when she needs help. And that's the whole thing. Nurture's imagination for the worst case scenario is that when I stand up for myself and I have a boundary, they are going to reject me. They're going to abandon me. I won't be safe and survive without those close relationships. So I'll continue to compromise and torture myself. Now, it can be true. Maybe there are people that you're serving and you're helping that if you stood up and said, yeah, here's how I can give and where I can give and why I give and to whom I give. And if they have a bad reaction to that, then they weren't really in your camp to begin with. They probably don't care about you, and maybe they are that more, is it narcissistic or, vampire or kind of, perpetrator kind of person in your life. And you need to know that if they are that kind of character, and stop fooling yourself and feeding loosh to somebody who is actually a bottomless pit, who will never fill up with what you give them. That's another shadow of the nurturer, to
Are you
give.
talking about my cats right now? Do they only love me because I feed them?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, they're terrible perpetrators, those cats. I got a lot of cat stories. But yeah, so you need to know, and then what I notice is that when you make it a clean boundary, it's easy to have a not clean boundary. You're just, again, it's that knee jerk pendulum swing you talked about. By the way, I did a whole training on getting off the nurturer's pendulum swing that people can get for free now. I believe you have a link to that, Chance, if you want to share that out, and people can get a taste of what this work is like, and also what the Nurturer Cure course is like. But when you come clean, you see your own motives that are not love, that are fear, and you let those go, and then you state your boundary. And chances are, in the process, you're going to have a lot more clarity about your boundary, that it's not some policy. Here's another really big shadow of the nurturer, is that they work on policies. So they have some kind of bad experience, and then they decide that, oh, here's how it goes from now into infinity. It's always going to go like that. And again, it doesn't match the flow of life. It doesn't match reality. You're always going to be in a new situation, because you're actually always in a new situation. There's no repeat and rinse in life at all. So if you carry around this block of policy, it's made of programs, and it's going to be very hard to come up with any like good, real circumstances, especially in relationships. And cats get a pass. Yeah, they are just totally a different beast. And so when you exercise a good and healthy boundary, the result is that it's good for everyone. It's good for you, and it's good for them, because one of the things that happens with the nurturers is that they enable others, right? They think that they're helping them and they're contributing to them and they're making them stronger, but that can actually be the exact opposite. And this is a big wake-up call for clients of mine, when they've been giving and giving, and then they get all drained, and then they realize that it's not just hurting them when they overgive. It's actually hurting the other. So that's usually the like, oh my God, something has to change here moment.
It's like the wild animal that you're feeding, and now it loses the ability to feed itself.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And you are thinking about them in a compromised view. You're worrying about them. You're seeing them as disabled, as unable, and your picture of them matters a lot, right? We interact.
Especially because the nurturer tends to be intelligent, more coherent, in a like energetically vibrant, to be able to do all the stuff they're doing. And there's a fact of nature that the more coherent mind entrains the dissonant mind. And so if you're, or like, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is so important. There's a comment here from Coma in the chat that says, and I'm not calling you out, I've been through exactly what you're describing here. I wouldn't call myself a nurturer, but I'm definitely an empath, which is why my ex was attracted to me. She has no empathy, just fake affection, love bombing, etc. I'm definitely not saying you didn't experience that, but there is a part of this that is the victim empath versus the energy vampire narcissist. That it's something that I've been through in like almost every relationship in my life romantically, until I tuned it out of myself and figured out that I was identifying with this. And so there's a part of this nurturer shadow that it's one of the sneakier parts of it that is like almost a greed for glory in a way.
Yes.
Right? It's the shadow of pride. It's the tube with the shadow of pride, Gabe. And what I mean by that is there's all the glory of being the big, perfect giver, doer for everybody. There's the glory of being I'm the heroic one. You know, I'm the good guy, they're the bad guy. I'm the good guy, they're the bad guy. That was how every previous romantic relationship I was in, I was framing it, even though I didn't realize it. And that hurts to stay in that. And you get stuck in life and it becomes your reason to procrastinate the things that actually would get you forward in life because you're busy working on this. But another aspect of the sneaky part of the greed here is that you said this at the very beginning is how it feels so good to give. And the feels really good to give. We all know this. Like we've all given the perfect Christmas present, right? Now, what happens when you want to give somebody a gift and they're like, "Oh no, I couldn't take that. Oh no, I wouldn't. No, I won't. I won't take it." And you thought about that gift. You've worked on that gift, or you invested in that gift. You were so excited to see the reaction. And like, "No, I couldn't take it. No, that sucks, right?" Now think about as this shadow nurturer that this is such, listen up. This is so important. Okay. When you refuse to ask for help or to ask for relief, you are robbing the people who love you of the opportunity to feel the energy of giving, of the opportunity to enjoy being on that side of the dynamic. Okay. You're stealing it from them. Like you're not helping them at all. It's so another way of putting it for a more positive twist is it's safe to ask for help or relief because it's a gift. When I ask for help or relief, I'm giving a gift to my loved one. They receive the gift of the giving. It's the reciprocity side. So important. Okay. So instead of, because all these nurturer shadows tend to have this, is one of the most common parts of the belief structure is that, oh, I'm putting them out. I can't put them out. I wouldn't want to put them out. No, you're reframe it, flip that. You're giving them the gift of that great energy. You're not hogging all the glory for yourself. So important. There's definitely like the glory hog that goes on. And it's like the furthest thing from what they're consciously thinking, but it's just the practical reality of the case. And now we need to give Gabe. Gabe is ready. He's celebrating over there. We're not hearing you, buddy. You look like you're really into it, but we can't hear anything.
Yeah, I said.
Hello, check. Anything?
Excellent.
Good.
Okay. So Glory is the name of Cleo. She is the second muse in the symposium. She's signified by a horn, um, and sometimes a bugle. And so you've mentioned Glory twice. I want to say what I've done with the Enneagram is beyond just a personality thing. I take this thing into institutions. It gets very hyperbolic, very quick. So a lot of the topic on the personality types reflects directly into the word giver monster. The government is the giver monster. They want all the glory. They want to be the enabler. This is deep coding. I call this deep coding. All of the Enneagram has deep coding that transcends the individual and goes into the macro hardcore. And so everything we're talking about is like the dysfunction of the government. The government has all of these shadows and they are so prideful and so enabling. And we know this. It's just taking it from the micro to the macro. All of a sudden we can see the forest. So I just wanted to, I'm writing down like these pinging words, like making policies, being enabling, stealing the glory. These are deep coded, latent derivatives of what the government wants to do. And then there's list keeping. And that is what we resent the government for the most. They want to hit you with a false story. This is okay. I want to say this. I got to be quick. Alan Moore taught me that the government is the bard, the dark bard, and they're going to put a false story on you. It is a satire. If you have a criminal record, a dark bard has put a satire on your life. Think of that. I learned that from Alan Moore, and I'm grateful. I'm not going to praise Alan Moore, but I'm grateful to have learned The criminal record, a false glory, a dark glory on your life is a dark satire from a bard, a bit of a curse. So yeah, I just wanted to say all that because leave it to Slick to bring the dark pill into the conversation because it does. It gets really crazy on the macro.
Wow, that's a big boom right there. And yeah, the degree to which that the governments are acting like nurturers, and that's the sugarcoating outside, that like we're here for your safety, we're looking after you. Oh, if you fall down, especially in Canada, we'll send you a check of some kind and you're not going to die, although those are like deadly levels of not really surviving kind of support when you see it. So many people took the support when the lockdowns happened in 2020, and our government was handing out $2,000 checks every month to everybody who couldn't work. And a lot of people are like, oh, free money. Yay. I get to just like lay around and do nothing in my pajamas and watch Netflix. Well, the government turned around and charged them for it later, right? Without telling them. Now, some people are 20 grand, 30 grand in debt because of this so-called handout that there was there, right? So it's the giver monster. Oh my goodness. Yeah. And that they want all the glory for all of that goodness that the humanity is experiencing, which is actually really going to hell out there in reality. But they're going to use that pride as a way to maintain. A big part of pride is persona, right? Where you've got this fake outer shell of that character in that show, but there's zero substance behind it. And it's the most destructive emotion of all of them, which can be hard to believe. I mean, they all have fear programming. So yeah, that's a pretty amazing connection there, Gabe. Yeah, you're just nailing it. Amazing. And if you're vulnerable to that, that's I guess the flip side of who would be vulnerable to those fake nurturers out there that want to rush in. Shadow nurturer might literally run around looking for someone to help, that they don't feel comfortable. And it goes back to something that you were saying earlier, Chance, is that they don't want to do their own inner work. They don't want to clean up their own life. They don't want to even begin to start fixing their own problems because they have mounted over time and become so big that they're actually motivated to abandon completely and desperately look for somebody else that they can ultimately end up enabling for this purpose of self-abandonment. So it gets pretty crazy. Like when you say the word nurturer, it sounds so warm and fuzzy, and it sounds quite feminine. Definitely not exclusive to women by any stretch of the imagination. Women and men do it differently. And then, yeah, the natural flow of life, like you said before, is the giving and the receiving, and the gift that it is to people to show. And I know this happened to me last fall when my health went down. And I did turn to my people, and I was so grateful at that time that I had trained them to do, because there's a kind of far and few between people that I will let into my inner world, because I'm sorry to say, it's, you can damage people. You can, it happened to me recently where I ended up in somebody's care, and they weren't qualified, and I had to recover from that. Right. And you get to that place where you have to be very picky and choosy about who to give those opportunities. And it was like priceless for me to have that kind of support back. And you could see it also was good for them. It was a learning experience on their part as well. So yeah, it is a gift, and it's like stealing not to be vulnerable at times. Doesn't mean you want to be vulnerable with the wrong people, though. That is another mistake that people make.
Yeah, that's true. It's that's why there's a course about it.
That's right.
Help you have your bearings where you're at. I
It's,
just wondered for a moment what the gematria of the word nurturer is. I like
ah,
septenary gematria because of the biblical evidence that that's like what English was meant to be looked at through. But what I found was nurturer adds up to 40, which is like a Venus number. It's like the 40 days of, or the 40 weeks of pregnancy. It's a motherly number. It's how do you think Moses felt wandering the desert for the 40 years? He was basically the nurturer to that whole group, and he got pretty damn fed up, right? In the story. So interesting. Let's see, got a screen share here, Beth. You want me to bring that up?
If you like, I've got the course up, so in case anybody wanted to see what was involved, I don't know if this is a good time for it or not, but since you brought it
Great.
up, we can talk about it. And yeah, so it's an opportunity to crush with boundaries instead of actually being crushed under the weight of how and what you give, because that's where people definitely find themselves. And this is to me for people who actually desire to be of service. They desire the world to be a stronger and healthier place because we care for each other. And especially with, I'm not totally convinced we're headed for doom, but just in case we are headed for doom, it's not a bad thing to prepare yourself and to be in relationships where you can both have good boundaries and recognize others who have good boundaries and are giving in a clean way. There's a lot of work to be done there. And so I'll maybe just scroll down to this is a lot of stories of nurture experiences in my life. And in step one, you're going to go from crashing to crushing in both self-care and service. And step two is stop trying to make yourself indispensable and neglecting your own needs. Step three is about, what do solid boundaries actually mean? Very badly misunderstood. How do you get there? What are the mechanics of that, rather than just making those policies that are actually sourced from fear compared to good boundaries sourced from love? And the last step is turning your passion for serving into purpose, because that's the ultimate elixir for the nurturer. And purpose is something that I've studied a great deal about over the course of my life. I nearly died of not honoring it and not following it. And so when a nurturer is able to get to that place of knowing themselves so well that they know not only why they give, but they know how they give in a way that is going to be mutually, beneficial, that they're going to be happy doing that, because many nurturers do things that they're actually miserable doing. And then most important of all is knowing who you help. Because if you just have an open policy, I help everybody because of your glory to yourself and the aggrandizement that you think that it brings you, then you are absolutely sunk. And you're going to be helping people that you don't genuinely really care about, or maybe a better way to say it, you might care about them, but they don't share your values. They don't share common goals. They don't, go in the world in a way that is resonant in alignment with you. So when the nurturer is able to narrow it down by understanding themselves and who they are, then that just becomes the biggest gift ever. And so when people come to you, you're like, okay, I have not a policy, but I have values. I have self-knowledge enough to know, yes, you are exactly the kind of person that I help. For example, I made a boundary some years ago that people need to be 100% committed in order to work with me as a client in a coaching context. And I had worked with all kinds of people. As long as they were, say, out of 10, they were a 7 or higher, I would work with them, because that level of commitment, it is enough to get some results. But it's a lack of commitment enough that they want to quit, especially when it comes to purpose work. Because it's the hardest work you're ever going to do. It's the hero's journey. It's going to put you up against the wall and make you feel like you're going to, you're not going to be able to have a breakthrough. You're going to die doing this. In fact, everybody dies on their hero's journey. So it's a real thing. And so getting to this place of, first understanding how to deal with a crash, because nurturers are all very familiar, whether that's a regular thing that you're doing on, a weekly, monthly, or annual basis. That frequency you can deal with in a really new way, and find alternatives to just having to lick your wounds, and to also beating yourself up, which is a really common thing for the nurturers. Believe it or not, they turn on themselves because of all of that secret hidden stuff that we were talking about. And creating that self-care manifesto and goals. There's actually, as part of this course, a potential add-on is a nurturer goals coaching group. Nurturers won't make goals. Why? Do you think, Chance?
Why nurturers won't make goals?
Yeah.
because they don't have the mental bandwidth.
Exactly. They're too busy helping people. So they think if they add anything like their own personal goal to it, that it's going to completely overwhelm them and they'll fall apart.
It's
So
like the part of their mind that deals with goals is overridden by all the goals they have for everybody else.
yes, yes, exactly. And
A
you
lot of
should never.
nurturers I know, they're telling you what your goals are. Like, this is what
That's
you should
it.
be doing. You know what I mean?
That's it. And it's entirely inappropriate to have a goal for anybody but yourself. So this is a really good turning of the tables, getting that focus on, what they haven't done or would like to do, especially before they aren't here anymore, when it's too late, or when they're compromised and it's too late. We talked about letting go of secret resentments. A lot of people don't see that, but if you look very carefully and you're honest with yourself, I promise you'll find that. And then cleaning up and preparing for service. The second module is addressing that need to be needed, and why you need people to need you, why it's one of the absolute biggest drains of all, and how you can stop that. Your true role in other people's lives, because it can seem like if you're not helping, you don't exist or there's no reason to exist. And I know I've been in places like that where, it's like, okay, God, what am I supposed to be doing here? If there's no one or anything to serve, then do I need to be here? So that's something that is really amazing to get to the other side of the actual role that you can serve in other people's lives. What is the profile of a healthy helper? That can be impossible to see as well if you're mired down in the shadows. And what is the profile of someone who's being enabled by a nurturer? That's super important to see. So you can see, are you actually enabling these people and holding them back despite your best intentions? We're also going to go through what I call the nurturer's worst case scenarios, that are all, like what we talked about already, how the consequences that you fear when you state your boundaries and you live by them, that you're afraid you're going to go through. They can be true, but you can also take a lot of that out through the tools of releasing and deprogramming, and not have to live out the worst case scenarios that are in your imagination. The art of solid boundaries, knowing what they are, what they're not, why you need them, knowing the difference, like we talked about earlier, between a nurturer's high and actual life energy. The signs of bad boundaries. So, it's all about pattern hunting in the world of archetypes. Once you find the pattern, then you can begin to use the tools to actually release the pattern. Getting past self-worth traps. It's a huge issue for people in our society. And we've been super brainwashed to think about, what's your worth? What's your value, especially compared to someone else's value? And to me, I'm just going to jump right to the punchline and tell you that it's a total lie and a total psyop. But what you can value is the work that you do. And that's what nurturers often fail to do. And game plans for tough love conversations, because having those can be very hard. I know I teach a whole module in my Journey Code training that is not this course, but on teaching coaches how to have hard conversations, because they come up. Absolutely. And then finally, with the elixir of sacred purpose is the hero's journey of a helper, how to stop feeling like you're always working on someone else's purpose, like you just said, deciphering the code of knowing who you are, who you're naturally wired to help, and how you help, and learning to find and release and actually let go of the energy drains and hooks within you. How God will work with you, but not for you. That's actually through Matt Presti and the work of Walter Russell. I think it was Leo Russell has a book under that title. I haven't read it yet, but it's perfect and really good, because the glory of the nurturer is like assuming the persona of a kind of God, which we are not, although that's a big discussion, complex and nuanced all by itself. And then new decisions for that nurturer. So the course takes place starting on July 10th, although if you sign up with that add-on for the Nurturer Goals Group session, that one takes place on June 21st. There is the early bird on until Saturday only. So for 3 more days, the investment is only $247. That's US. And then it goes up on the 19th the 16th, to $347. And then you can also add on and upgrade to include the Find Your Sacred Purpose course, because that's a very deep dive in looking at what are the fine points of purpose, which are not what people expect almost at all. And this is just something about me. And these are some stories that people have told me, that breakthroughs they've had with
Can
the
we read some
nurture.
of these?
For sure. Yes, absolutely. So this is from Sarah, who I worked with. She says, I know I'm here on a mission from God, and I know that I can only do good work with clean hands. Not that I am so far out of my integrity, and any amount, no matter how small, makes a difference. Thank you for being a woman I look up to. Thank you for embodying integrity. Thank you for reminding me of what my soul knows. Meredith said she feels a sense of freedom that is beyond mind, and finds her brain sometimes scrambling to find the hooks it used to hang its hat on, as if it were, um, as it were.
I know that feeling.
There you go. Yeah. And she's guided to choose wisely when needed in matters concerning her son, until he's ready and able to do so himself. It's very tricky with children. It's easier with adults to have good boundaries. And then, there is a reality when somebody is not able to care for themselves yet. It's not a enabling situation, although it can be. Janet says it helped me see why I have to push back, or I've had to push back, and
Why I've had pushback, I think, is
I've
just
had,
grammatically
there's a typo in
challenged.
there actually. Yeah, exactly. Pushback and resistance. Thank you. So often when trying to help. Now instead I can reference and memorize some of these points and hopefully see better results immediately. And that is a huge part of this process, is just knowing the patterns and being able to recognize them like a ninja, like, oh, there it goes. Here's how I feel. Here's the program that's there. And I'm going to make a new choice at this stage. This is from Kiersey. She said she's thrilled to be on this journey. What a relief, in particular, to own steps to lead people to their own conclusions, which is something that nurtures, like you said, they want to make your goals and they want to make your conclusions and have your truth for you. She says, I've helped people all my life and can see how that point has been a huge stumbling block, giving advice. I've taken the driver's seat, so wrong as it never works. That's what I notice. I would love to give advice all day long. I've got lots of it, but it doesn't work. It doesn't actually connect people with their own inner intelligence that is naturally there. Scott says Beth modeled the depths of her coaching ability by demonstrating how she reads at the feeling level. Amazing. It encouraged me to nurture the power of empathy within myself to better serve my clients. Thank you, Beth. And this is a bit of a longer story, but I could still read it if you like.
I think that I want to just focus on how the child of alcoholic parents is a big part. But hey, let's go ahead and read it. But that's so super common, child of alcoholic parents, because the low functioning parent or parents often develops a nurturer child, because the child has to be taking care of the family from way too early of an age, and that just becomes like their comfort zone.
Exactly. Yeah. So that the tables are turned. She says she was parentified and essentially groomed to be the caretaker of her entire family from about 5 years old onwards. So pretty outrageous demand on her. It was a pathway that continued for most of her life and contains the seeds of near destruction by being overgiving, over responsible, overachieving, and hyper agreeable. The first big wake up that she was heading towards destruction was a near-death experience from her heart being literally burnt out, made her so ill she had no choice but to withdraw from the world, including vocationally, and try to build herself up again. She was feeling like the walking dead. And after enormous amounts of hard work, she returned to a place she was proud of, being self-sufficient with a thriving self-employed practice, helping people. Not surprising. Everybody in the helping profession, you're going to find some kind of story like this in their past. Also, gifted, intelligent people, it comes from damage, right? It comes from, to me, it's almost as if God compensating you. So after enormous amounts of hard work, she returned to a place she was proud of, being self-sufficient. Oh, I already read that, sorry. And then guess what? It all collapsed again. And this time it was even worse. She couldn't see a way out of the pattern. She became disillusioned and angry at God for taking things away from her, yet again couldn't understand why she was there especially when she'd worked so hard and had nothing to show for the entirety of her life. Why, oh, why? That she prayed for help despite blaming God, as she knew she couldn't keep pushing this boulder up a hill anymore, got burnt out and exhausted and moving. She had got burnt out and exhausted moving into that death space again. She really needed help. The answer came to me in the form of Beth Martins and the archetypal and deprogramming work, and specifically the information contained within the nurturer. It was like a bolt from the heavens when I worked with this material. I could see where I was getting stuck, not having been taught boundaries as a child, and instead had been groomed to give my all to another, to love and care for those in pain, even up to the point of death. As an empath and a highly sensitive person, this was torture to my very soul, to swing and give too much, losing myself, burning out, and then giving nothing as I recovered. That's the nurture pendulum swing I was talking about. This was pure crazy making. Being part of Beth's coaching courses and Journey Code training was some of the best decisions she'd ever made in her life. They helped her to deprogram from the grooming and find a much healthier way to really love, care, and be of service to others, which does not include harming herself through neglect. She says, I now have and maintained all incredibly busy, thriving practice, and best of all, I've finally learned what boundaries are at 55 years of age. Beth taught me what my parents could not, and I thank her from the bottom of my heart for this massive gift of freedom. Huge shout out to Caroline. She is really an amazing being and a gifted healer. And then there's one more. Do you want to read this one as well?
I realized that a component to the activation of the nurturer shadow in me was an unawareness of my motivations. Programming kept me in the trap of presuming that all helping or offers to help were a good thing. Nope. My breakthrough and liberation came with the simple question, what kind of help really helps? Without a clear answer within myself and one for each instance. And the shadow side of the nurturer, hubris, pride, showed up. Using the gift side of the archetype, there was an awareness that it's the allowing of God to work through me and not on my own timing or my personal needs. And that requires of me my ongoing listening to and responding to that still small voice. Bonus, it also benefits other aspects of my life. Yeah, lots of really good feedback for you there, Beth. Gabe is doing the hand-raising dance. We're going to call on Gabe now.
Absolutely. Here, I'll stop the share.
Oh, you're still muted. You're somehow muted. It looks like you're really into it, though. There we go. No, still can't hear you.
Darn. I really want to hear him.
Me too.
It's way more fun that way.
How about that?
Got it.
Okay. So the very first entry on those accounts started with the clean hands of equity. And I love that that was at the beginning of the written accounts of Beth Martins, because that is signified by Cleo, the second muse. She is holding the scroll of the Thucydides history of the Peloponnesian War that is the provenance of equity. And the Mylian dialogues are the secret of secrets in that text. And it is so profound. We've been talking about glory. We're talking about the number 2 personality type. And here the muse shows up in the written word. That's her jam, is the written word. Her sister Polyhymnia is the spoken word, number 1. She's number 2. And she's often signified as well by a backpack, because she carries her books and her scrolls around everywhere. But think of the giver. The giver wants to be ready at all times, and they have so much that they want to. They carry it around. They're luggage oriented. So I just wanted to signify the clean hands of equity in your accounts. It's just so mystically wonderful. These muses are here to stay. And I just love when I see them right where they belong in other people's lives. So I just wanted to, when I see clean hands of equity, I know they're watching and they love us.
Amazing, Gabe. I totally want to have you guys on my show, by the way, if you pick a subject that is you work so well together. I've noticed that over time. There's such a relationship, and there's the cat, the evil cat, the taker.
This, yeah, he's kind of like that, but he's the good one too.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
Gandalf.
I don't mean to put him down at all. Oh, little
No,
sweetie. Yeah,
look at him.
yeah.
He's good.
Mm, beautiful. Yeah.
Just ready
So
for
So
my
I
food.
have one more thing I'd like to share with you, Beth. That
please.
yeah, one more thing that is on the global zeitgeist right now is the visual totem, the egregore, the conceptual uh, tulpa of the Palestine flag. And this is boiling up a great amount of animosity. Even flags in general are working in our psyche in a great amount of ways. The pride flag, this we're talking about the shadow of pride. The pride flag is going to, strangely enough, this is orchestrated. It's going to irk people who are concerned about Floyd because Pink Floyd immortalized the rainbow and its relationship to the word Floyd. And so the pride flag and the Floyd thing are like two sides, a Jacqueline and a Boaz in their own right. But back to the Palestine flag. Palestine is an anagram for placenta. The
Mm,
word Palestine flag is one letter away from the word placentophagy. Placentophagy is the initiated. And I just find it so profound that they are putting this symbol in a acrimonious light. And I just wanted to share that with you, Beth, because I know that these symbols, they fly over our heads. They fly over our heads. It's beyond, it's hyper metaphorical, maybe. I don't know, but I just wanted to share that little weave with you that we know the significance of the placenta, and I think it's being dragged through the mud quite with by the engineers. We'll just leave it at
wow, that's pretty deep stuff. And yeah, I think people underestimate and might even have pride like, oh, well, none of that stuff affects me, doesn't bother me. But we are wired to be influenced at the level of archetypes. And they're almost like parking spots in our psyche. So when those symbols are there, sometimes, especially when you don't pay attention to them, that's when they have the biggest influence, is when they just come in the back door, right? And but if you take the time to think about it, what message am I being given? It's a little over my pay grade to think about the flag. I don't even, I can't even think of it in my mind, because I am looking away from all of that stuff, I have to admit, because that keeps me going in my more hopeful and productive and creative kind of work. But yeah, there's no end to that hijacking of our own psyches through symbols, through archetypes, through the choice of words, right? That's why people will pay branding artists incredible amounts of money to create an experience on the surface that is that persona, that is a kind of flagship for a business or a service or whatever it is, to to um, to make an experience that might not be there. It might be there. There might be substance behind the persona. That's always good if you've got that, but it's not a given that it's there. And yeah, people are very vulnerable to that. They're very influenceable. We think we're beyond that in the truth and the freedom movement, but we just have a different flavor of it. There's more masculine energy, more uh, predator energy, actually, which is good because it makes you more likely to stand up for yourself, but then you fall for other kinds of traps in the process. So to me, the work is always going to come down to our willingness to dig the real freedom and let go of the highs and the dopamines and the adrenalines and the pride and the persona, and get down to the actual heart of things. And that's why finding the patterns inside yourself is a good first step. That's great. I made a lot of progress, for example, surviving cancer that way. But because the layers of programming are like a layered cake, and they're used to protect as if our very life and our survival, which is a total complete lie. They do not protect you at all. They drain the life right out of you. They make you act out of integrity. They make you throw your values and your morals out the window at the opportune times when you think that, oh, everybody's going to love me because I'm the glory of everything, doing everything for everyone. And then it will be a showstopper, right? You will crash. It comes to that point, and you probably already notice that it has a pattern. That crashing has been a pattern in your life. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to offer this. It was something that God told me over and over and over to do. And I was saying it like, oh yeah, I have to do the nurture course. Oh yeah, I have to do the nurture course. And it was finally, I remember I'm laying in bed at night and I'm going like, I'm going to die on my deathbed wishing I had given that nurturer course. And I was like, oh, I'm doing it. Just going to do it. I'm going to put it out there. And that's my contribution towards the injury that we have that's so deep. And every little bit of work that you do on yourself matters a lot, and you will see instant results from it. That every time you let go of something that's not true, you reclaim life energy, because it took a lot of energy to run a fake experience. So we're getting down to real, going through the experiences all the way to freedom, to me, which is the purpose of the experiences in the first place. There's ones we like, ones we don't like, but they're all for the exact same purpose: to go through and to see the hidden lies and the hidden motives, so you can make lucid, awake choices that will support life rather than cooperate with the death cult.
I love it, Beth. And just want to say this nurture archetype, it may come across in the conversation like we're kind of saying that this is a bad thing or bad quality. We're talking about the shadow side of something that's within all of us, that is our gift to the world. We all want to give. It's part of feeling fulfilled. It's reciprocity requires that. But even if you don't see yourself as like particularly geared towards being a nurturer, I want everyone to consider how the heart disease epidemic has developed in the Western countries. And I think that there's a correlation here, because in the energy field or the biofield, one of the parts of the heart has to do with our capacity to say no when we want to say no. And how many people live most of their life, at least in one area of life, which ends up being a very large area, 40 or more hours a week of their life for years and years, saying yes to things they would rather say no to, right? So at the very least, when it comes to our occupation and our work, almost all of us are at least have, holding some experience of this, the shadow side of this nurture of wanting to be indispensable, because there's like a fear of, well, I can't lose my job. I need to make sure that I'm indispensable in this job. And then there's the higher up version of it, like where maybe you're running the business or you're a co-owner of the business. I'm going to talk about my own mother for a moment here, because she's literally a saint. She's one of the greatest people on earth. So I'm not knocking her in any way, but if there was a shadow of a nurturer, she's somebody that has dealt with that. And I'm impressed to say that just through her own spiritual side and her own faith, she's found a lot of progress in dealing with her, like some of the turbulence of being the shadow nurturer. But also there's some parts of her still, I'm just being honest, she's the greatest mom of all time, don't get me wrong, but that it's like the functional alcoholic. Like, she's so capable and so intelligent, she just keeps finding ways to keep making it work and keep putting duct tape on the iceberg hole in the Titanic. And like, so I'm going to tell a little story about her. I hope she doesn't mind, but there was a situation that went down at the business that she is a co-owner of, where one of her business partners essentially like went over her head and made a very big decision about a demotion of somebody just kind of, just without any consideration of her feelings on the matter. And there's a lot of more complicated elements to this story that made it particularly like a personal affront. She'd had what she considered to be like a familial relationship with this business partner, having been, he's the cousin, or he's the husband of my dad's first cousin. So like there's a family connection. I think they've smoothed over things, to a degree, but there was this huge transgression of boundaries. And at the point where this all went down, it kind of came out in the wash about how many of the employees of the company just had were spying on and ratting out people that were like under her care in terms of employment. And so there's this big revelation of this network of massive disrespect towards her in the company. Yet she's literally the most indispensable person there, in terms of if there was one person you unplugged from the company that would cause it to instantly crash and burn, it would be her, because she's running the books. She's making the contract decisions, all kinds of stuff, like just ridiculously indispensable, and has made herself such. Things like, she's always minimizing the cost of her administration department, while the other departments are allowed to, hire whoever you need. It's fine. It's fine. Do what you got to do. Your business partners, oh, you guys don't need to work that much, but she's like slaving away. So she went through this huge traumatic revelation of the disrespect. And it's important why I'm telling this story is because when you don't respect yourself, you get disrespect. When you don't respect yourself, even though from your perspective, you're just giving so much that you ought to be like the most loved and cherished saintly being, you're going to get disrespect. That's just what it is. It's not going to add up the way that you thought it was. And it's just, you got to recognize that being indispensable is not the same thing as being a friend. And so when the blowout comes, it can be very upsetting to realize you weren't legitimately loved or respected. And sometimes there's like astrological components to that whole blowout. It was like Pluto went retrograde and Mars went into Aries, and then all of a sudden some rash decisions were made and people were fighting, and that's part of it too. And it kind of cooled off a little bit after that. But the point, remained is she had to go through a very painful experience. That the good news is, the support system of our immediate family, like my sister and I in particular, were able to sort of guide her to the place of like, this just is revealing a time bomb that was there the whole time. And what needs to happen is that like, you need more help. You need to not be this linchpin that does everything for everybody and gets no respect because of not respecting yourself and putting yourself in that position. And, it all ended up working out as in a good way in the end, but that was a very painful experience. And like, your course could help somebody recognize the ticking time bombs of the unexpressed expectations, for example, and set things up for themselves and transition away from those inevitable pitfalls so that you get to the end result without the pain and the damaging of relationships that you want to maintain. And that's why I tell this whole story, not to like out anybody or make a public recrimination or anything. It's just like this is what happens as you set yourself up for a lot of pain, and it's painful the whole time up to that point too, to be like, wow, I'm the only one working on Saturday. Wow. It's don't stay there. Don't stay there. It's going to end one way or the other. Is it going to end in tears and bloodshed, or is it going to end in a nice transition into a better dynamic for everybody involved? Right. So that's kind of my last rant on the subject. I've really enjoyed this talk. I think it's very, very needed. Like, again, what I started talking about the heart conditions, my mom, way younger in life than is normal, had to have like an ablation because of heart issues. And it's absolutely the right side of the heart chakra in the biofield, the saying yes when we want to say no. Raised by a mother who was not functional, had to be the mother to her own mother, all of the all of the key hallmarks. Great. My mom's awesome. Don't get me wrong, but like she struggled through the shadow of the nurturer. And I just wanted to get that off my chest. I love her though. Love you, Mom. If you listen to this, love you. I hope this has helped.
It's actually really important to share the stories because that is how we learn. Those are our mythologies in life. And when you unpack them, like I don't hear any lack of love in your voice whatsoever. It's just a matter of fact kind of thing. And it's really important to know the nuances because, just from the outside, it kind of sounded like she was surrounded by assholes. If they're willing to collude against her in the face of the service that she's giving to make it easy for everybody else, they don't sound like good people to me. And it's important, so if you can work through that and you can see that, yeah, there's some level maybe of her disrespecting herself, which can only take place in that kind of a context. So it's becoming aware, and there have been times, I woke up to
Well,
collusion.
it's
Yeah.
almost like women are the trainer and men are the dogs. Not to belittle men, but it's like bad dog trainer, in that whole workplace. Long-term bad habits established. It's the expectations thing. Your lack of expressing your true expectations leading them to develop expectations from you that are completely irrational or it's that whole thing we started on.
You got it. You got it. I don't know if you still have time, but I'd like to talk about the strengths and the gifts of the nurturer because, like you said,
Yeah.
it makes it sound like this is just a bomb. But every single archetype has a way to express in a consciously chosen way, and it does turn into a superpower, meaning that it has the energy of the creator behind it because of its alignment with creation. And so, a really big gift of the nurturer is that you have value for others, right? There's not everybody in the world has that. They don't look out for others, they're looking out for number one. And they don't have their eye on the what can be a greater good. Now that's been very highly weaponized against us in the last 4 years, especially. But I think we know what we're talking about here. So the willingness to help others achieve success and to find satisfaction in that, we need each other's help. We can't do anything great in the world without that. And being generous and giving. What if we had a lot more generous, giving people that would, some people have, they're a single person or a single family in 4,000 square feet of everything. And what if there was a little bit more of distribution? Now that's weaponized by communism, of course. Here's another great quality. Had a fantastic discussion
Well, it's the shadow of the nurturer that got everyone to roll up your sleever. It's the sacrificing for the group thing.
That's it.
I say it all the time. If everybody sacrifices themselves for the group, everybody is sacrificed. Oops. That's what communism doesn't work.
There you go. Yeah, it was exactly playing on that weakness and that shadow, because if people were aware, they'd realize. Go ahead, Gabe. Was Gabe Gabe, were you wanting to say something? Or yeah, here it comes.
Yes. Am I coming through?
Yes.
Okay. Safe, secure is an anagram for sacrifice. My father and I had a conversation a while back, and he was kind of ranting. We were both passive aggressively ranting about the lockdowns, but not talking directly about the lockdowns. And he's trying to get an elbow on me, and he's like, I hate it when people mistake kindness for weakness. And I elbowed him right back. I was like, well, if you don't conflate safety for kindness, you won't have that problem. And that's
Brilliant.
something for the givers to consider, especially after those lockdowns. Safety and kindness, nothing to do with each other.
There you go.
Also, on your list for the givers, just while I'm talking, I've found magnanimity to be very pertinent to the giver. And then there's like a dark extreme of magnanimity is megalomaniacal. So it's like for us, we want magnanimity, but we see how the government makes it megalomaniacal. And knowing how those two words are strangely related is really fascinating. So I just wanted to say that while I was talking.
Yeah, brilliant. Exactly. It's can be a fine line, highly nuanced, and only the person inside knows. Right? You can't just look out and name certain behaviors for people as wrong or coming from a shadow. They're gonna know. So yeah, there's so much nuance in there. Magnanimity, yeah, such a great word. Exactly. More another very strong gift of this archetype is loyalty. And this is something that is a very interesting discussion took place on my Facebook the other day because I asked the question and it was a little bit of a leading question to see how people saw it. I said, "What are the pros and cons of loyalty?" And there was some so thoughtful answers, and people came forward. It actually birthed a whole video in the House of Free Will on that quality. And the we love loyal people, but it's been so again weaponized against us, right? So we're being asked to be loyal to entities that are artificial. They're governments, they're brands, they're the organizations of with people that just come and go. So, and then is it even appropriate to be loyal to people? And to me, it's possible that loyalty is something. Someone actually said something brilliant that I totally agree with. And to be loyal to your own principles, to your own morals, to your own values, not to yourself, because then that creates that magnanimity, megalomania kind of spectrum, right? Where you become self-serving. That's definitely a shadow of a nurturer, where you decide to serve yourself exclusively. And but nonetheless, the loyalty in relationships. I'm actually giving a talk this weekend on this with the Nonconformist series, which I think you posted about, or no, maybe somebody else posted about, and it's on that subject of decentralized societies. Which it's great. It sounds awesome, and we've been in the process ourselves locally here to, have a place where we're growing food and in relationship. And the biggest Achilles heel, speaking of Achilles heel from before, is people's ability to get along and to be clean in their motives of giving, and to be the person that actually does work, and not like your mom where they just all let her do everything and do all the working overtime. To be able to recognize someone who has good boundaries and who doesn't, who's an honest giver and who is not. All of that is going to be so important for any kind of societies to get, like, getting along is the hard part, and the relationships. So yeah, rather working for others' benefit rather than just self-fulfillment, being of service, true sacrifice we talked about. They're also really great in the area of finances. There's one reason that the archetype will go into a shadow around money. It's because they give their money away too much. Otherwise, they can be very responsible, and they don't, they don't hate money, and they don't mind looking at their numbers and taking care of that on a regular basis.
A lot of them are maybe give away their money too much, but they're great at making money, because there is an aspect of that energy that flows through you easily will attract to you.
Right. And
to a degree. I mean, there's a balance to be had there, but that's, there's a lot of the nurturers are able to, like, they have the means to, and they still, maybe it's out of whack sometimes in the shadow, but yeah, it's got to be a cool position to be in, to be able to provide like that, big providers.
Right, exactly. Look at men who look after their family and their children and everything. It all comes down on them. That's a lot of pressure. And so the last gifts being the ability to take responsibility, being reliable. How many people say they're going to do something and they never do it? Right? Volunteers, the word that they swap out is optional. I volunteered for something, so I don't really have to do it. And competence as well. So these are qualities that, if they came to the forefront more in our societies, in our day-to-day dealings and relationships, especially what the future might hold for us, then it really will change everything.
Yep. And so nurturers out there, which is everybody, but if the shadow sides of the nurturer would feel like a big part of your life struggle, or you just have like uncharacteristic for your age, heart issues or ankle issues, those are often related to the nurturer too in the biofield. I think that we're at a good point to maybe wrap this up. I mean, we could go for a lot longer just because it's fun hanging out and this subject is vast. And as we get into the tangential connections to other archetypes, it's just a forever conversation, the self knowledge. But I want to give a shout out to Oxygen. Thank you for the great super chat there, buddy. 2 super chats. Appreciate you. And then over on the Rockfin side, Jason Reed super chatted. Thank you for both of those. We appreciate that very much. And don't forget, check the link in the show description. I'll post it in the chat one more time as well for where you can sign up for Beth's course. And she kindly even provided me an affiliate link. So if you guys want to just sign up for Beth's course and nurture her a little bit, go find the link through her website, a clean link. But if you want to kick some over to me, I appreciate that too. It's we're all about the win-win, and you can use my affiliate link in the episode description or what I just posted in the live chat. And with that, we'll pass the talking stick around to Slick and Beth. I'll remind everyone the biofield tuning sessions are going really well. Don't forget to check those out. Also linked in the description. Sound healing page on my website will tell you more about it. Great way to, at the very least, maybe get make some headway on whatever your out of whack archetypes are. If not fully, just alleviate some of the physical manifestations that come along from the psychic dysfunction. It's very possible. Very possible. Happens a lot. The sessions are going really well. So love y'all. And Beth, anything you want to say in the closing?
Just thank you so much. And I do highly recommend people, if you book the course, book it through Chance. It's a very graceful relationship because there's a giving and a receiving. I asked for this opportunity to come and speak about the archetype. Turned out to be perfect timing. I had something to offer so that it's more worth your time. And I find the relationships are very, very lovely and mutual in that respect. So definitely use Chance's link. Absolutely. I would love that. And you can visit my website for an archetype quiz to see where on the path of purpose you are. If you don't come up with the nurturer, for example, it doesn't mean that that's not part of you, because you are all archetypes on the hero's journey, and you can see what came before you, what's ahead of you, get a little bit of a lay of the land. And also I have the Journey Code coaching certification training starting in the fall in a few months. So that's coming up. Also a really good one for nurturers that are wanting to help, but they want to do it professionally and they want to do it cleanly. And thank you, Oxygen. I like your name, by the way. And so that's something that if you want to put your hand up and let me know, we can have a talk about it. It's really by application only. So just let me know. And I think that's it. It's just been fantastic to have this conversation. Thank you so much, Chance, and Gabe also. That was a great surprise to have him here. And I definitely want to have you guys on.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that.
Yeah.
We'll get something lined up. Gabe and I can always talk. There's a reason why he's my wingman here. First of all, because he's so magnanimous himself, great in spirit, Magnus plus anima. It's absolutely true. And Gabe is a huge giver, especially in the gift of his witness. Something I want to shout you out there for, buddy. Nobody's got such a powerful and profound, uplifting and confidence enhancing witness as you. And that's why I always like having you here. And just so you know, even if it ever feels like you need to ask for relief from duty, you don't have to be here every Wednesday. Actually, you're pretty good at that whenever you're not up for it. But don't feel like there's an expectation that you must serve. But we love having you here, man. And I think the chat feels the same way. You got any thoughts as we're closing it up, buddy?
It is such an honor to be here, especially today. Beth, you are completely one of my favorite heroes, and I just love the sense that I'm shoulder to shoulder with giants in this community. Yeah, we are powerful creators, and I'm learning to appreciate that to be playful is to be powerful, and it is so wonderful to come and play with you tonight. This was an honor. Thank you so much. I love you.
No, love you too.
You too,
That's
Chance. You're all right.
All right. Thanks, Beth. All right. Well, good night to all. And happy Gemini season as we're wrapping it up. It's almost time for Cancer season. Solstice is coming. Exciting times, everybody. The height of the sun. Consciousness is strong. And take advantage of that. Look within. See what's there. Shine the light in the dark corners. Bring the shadow to light of some of these archetypes. You can do it. It's a good time for it. And you guys take care out there. Be good. Much love.
Thank you.